The day I met him, I was at my lowest, broke, hopeless, and crying on a park bench. He offered me coffee and conversation. For 3 years, mysterious opportunities kept saving my life. I never connected the dots until I saw his photo in the newspaper. Life has this funny way of feeling perfectly normal until suddenly it isn't. 6 months before I met him, I was living the life I thought I was supposed to have. Steady job at a marketing firm, a small but comfortable apartment, enough in savings to occasionally treat myself to dinner out. Nothing extraordinary, but stable. The kind of life where you don't realize how precarious everything is until it all starts falling apart. It began with company-wide layoffs. Last hired, first fired, they said, as if that made it any easier to watch my security disappear overnight. I wasn't worried at first. I had my savings, I had my resume, I had my experience. But what I didn't account for was just how quickly everything could spiral. 2 months of rejected applications, 3 months of dipping into savings meant for emergencies, 4 months of choosing between electricity and groceries. Then came the medical bills. Just a simple infection that picked the absolute worst time to send me to the ER. The final blow was the eviction notice taped to my door on a rainy Tuesday morning. I remember staring at it, feeling nothing at first, then everything all at once: shame, fear, anger, and finally, a crushing hopelessness that made it hard to breathe. That's how I ended up on that park bench in late October, clutching a coffee I couldn't afford, using the last of my phone battery to search for shelters. I couldn't call my parents, they were struggling themselves. Friends had already lent what they could. I sat there trying not to cry in public and failing miserably, watching people walk by, all with someplace to go, all with lives intact. Have you ever wondered if someone was secretly watching over you? If there was an invisible thread connecting you to a complete stranger who would change everything? Stay with me to discover how a chance encounter that cold autumn morning completely altered the course of my life, and how sometimes help comes from the most unexpected places, in the most unexpected ways. I still remember every detail of that morning on the park bench. The way the cold seeped through my thin jacket, the steam rising from my coffee cup, the emptiness in my stomach that the coffee couldn't fill. I was trying to hide my tears behind my hair when I noticed someone had sat down beside me. "Beautiful day, isn't it?" he said, and I almost laughed at how wrong he was. There was nothing beautiful about that day to me. He was older, maybe in his 60s, with silver-rimmed glasses and kind eyes that crinkled at the corners. He wore a navy pea coat that looked worn but well cared for, and he carried a leather messenger bag that had seen better days. When I didn't respond, he added, "Sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger. No judgment, no history, just two humans sharing a bench." His voice had this gentle quality to it, like someone who was used to calming frightened animals. Against my better judgment, I found myself talking. I told him about the layoff, the medical bills, the eviction notice. Words spilled out like I'd been waiting for someone to ask. He just listened, nodding occasionally, not interrupting with advice or platitudes. When I finally ran out of words, he offered me a handkerchief, an actual cloth handkerchief. Who even carries those anymore? And a second cup of coffee from a thermos. "Life has seasons," he said as he poured the coffee into the cup lid. "Right now you're in winter. It feels like it will last forever, but spring always comes." It should have sounded trite, but there was something in the way he said it, like he knew from experience, that made me believe him. We talked for almost an hour. He never told me his name, and strangely, I never asked. He asked thoughtful questions about my skills, my background in marketing, my dreams before everything fell apart. By the time he stood to leave, I felt lighter somehow. "Sometimes the universe has a way of course correcting," he said, adjusting his scarf against the wind. "Keep your eyes open, good things are coming." Then he smiled, tipped his hat, an actual tip of his actual hat, and walked away. I watched him go, this kind stranger who had given me nothing but coffee and conversation, yet somehow left me feeling like I could breathe again. I never expected to see him again. I certainly never expected how right he would be. 3 days after meeting the stranger, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. Another debt collector, I assumed, but something made me answer. It was a woman named Sarah from Horizon Marketing, asking if I could come in for an interview the following morning. When I asked how she got my name, she mentioned a mutual connection had strongly recommended me. I racked my brain trying to figure out who this connection could be. My former colleagues were all scattered after the layoffs, and I hadn't told many people about my situation. But I wasn't about to question this stroke of luck. I spent that night ironing my one interview outfit on my landlord's porch since my electricity had been cut off, rehearsing answers to potential questions under my breath. The interview itself felt almost surreal. The position was for a digital marketing specialist focusing on non-profit campaigns, exactly the niche I'd told the park bench stranger I'd always wanted to work in. When the interviewing manager mentioned they were looking for someone who could think outside conventional marketing approaches, I heard an echo of my own words from the park bench conversation. "Your resume is impressive," the manager said, but it was the personal recommendation that really caught our attention. When I tried to casually ask who had recommended me, she checked her notes and said only, "A consultant we've worked with. He said you were exactly what we needed." I left with a job offer. Not just any job, a job with a living wage, healthcare benefits, and flexible hours that would allow me to eventually go back to school. As I walked out of the building, a strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't just relief or gratitude, it was the uncanny sense that something didn't quite add up. That night, as I sat in my apartment with the lights finally back on, I thought about the stranger's words. "Keep your eyes open. Good things are coming." It seemed impossible that he could have had anything to do with this job opportunity. And yet, the timing, the specific field, the mysterious recommendation, it all seemed too perfect to be mere coincidence. But I pushed the thought away. People don't just go around secretly changing strangers' lives. It was just good luck, I told myself. Just the universe finally cutting me a break. I had no idea then that this was only the beginning. The new job at Horizon Marketing changed everything. For the first time in months, I could breathe without that crushing weight on my chest. I found a small studio apartment I could actually afford, started rebuilding my savings, and even began to make friends with my co-workers. Life was finally stabilizing, and I was grateful, but I had no idea the string of coincidences was just beginning. It started with an email from a local community college about their evening business program. "We're pleased to inform you that you've been selected for the Mitchell Foundation Scholarship," it read. The scholarship would cover full tuition and books for completing my business degree. The very degree I'd mentioned to the stranger I had abandoned years ago when money got tight. When I called the admissions office to make sure it wasn't a mistake, they confirmed everything was legitimate. But when I asked about the selection process, they were surprisingly vague. "Your application was quite impressive," they said, except I hadn't submitted an application. 3 months into my courses, my grandmother's health took a turn. She raised me after my parents split, and the thought of her struggling alone in another state was unbearable. I requested time off work, scraped together money for a plane ticket, and prepared for the inevitable medical bills that would set me back again. But when I arrived at the hospital, the billing department had no record of any balance due. "It shows here that all expenses have been covered by the Patient Assistance Fund," the administrator told me. Someone must have applied on her behalf. The biggest shock came when my landlord mentioned he was selling the building. Just as I began panicking about finding another affordable place, my phone pinged with a real estate listing. The message read, "Thought this might interest you." rent-controlled unit, available immediately. The sender was listed only as auto notification. The apartment was perfect, closer to both work and school, in a safer neighborhood, and somehow within my budget. These lucky breaks kept happening. An anonymous industry contact-sharing job, leads that perfectly matched my growing skills. A free ticket to a marketing conference I couldn't have afforded. Even a refurbished laptop delivered to my door when mine died the night before a major project was due. The note simply said, "Tools for your journey." Eventually, I started to feel watched, not in a threatening way, but as though someone was orchestrating these moments from behind a curtain. I'd find myself scanning crowds, looking at strangers more carefully, wondering if I'd spot those kind, crinkled eyes again. Sometimes I'd feel a presence, turn quickly, and catch nothing but a glimpse of a navy coat disappearing around a corner. Friends told me to just be grateful for my good fortune. Some people just have lucky streaks, they'd say. But deep down, I knew this wasn't random luck. These weren't coincidences. They were too perfectly timed, too specifically tailored to my needs. Someone was pulling strings. I just couldn't figure out who, or why. I found out who my mysterious benefactor was purely by accident. I was sitting in a cafe near campus, flipping through the local newspaper someone had left behind, when a familiar face stopped me mid-turn. There he was, the stranger from the park bench, smiling formally from a black and white photograph. The headline read, "Local philanthropist James Harrington donates $5 million to community development." My coffee went cold as I devoured every word of that article. James Harrington, 64, retired CEO of a tech company I'd actually heard of. The piece detailed his unconventional approach to philanthropy, focusing on direct intervention in individual lives rather than just institutional giving. There was a quote from him that made my hands shake. Sometimes the most profound change comes from meeting people exactly where they are, in their moment of need, and providing not just resources, but genuine human connection. I stared at his photo until the cafe started closing. Those were definitely the same kind eyes, the same silver-rimmed glasses. The article mentioned his foundation's scholarship program, the Mitchell Foundation Scholarship, named after his mother. It mentioned a healthcare fund for underinsured patients. It even highlighted his work connecting promising professionals with job opportunities in their fields. Everything connected in that moment. It hadn't been random luck or coincidence. It had been him, all along, orchestrating these opportunities from behind the scenes. The job interview that came from a mutual connection. The scholarship I never applied for. The medical bills mysteriously covered. Even my apartment. The article mentioned affordable housing as one of his foundation's priorities. I felt a complex wave of emotions, gratitude, confusion, and something that felt strangely like betrayal. Why hadn't he just told me who he was? Why the secrecy, the puppet master routine? Part of me felt like a charity case, a project he'd taken on out of pity. Another part recognized something profound in what he'd done. He'd never made me feel indebted. He'd given me opportunities, not handouts. He'd been careful to preserve my dignity even while changing my life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I searched his name online and found more articles, interviews, a TED Talk about his philosophy of giving. "Traditional philanthropy creates dependency," he said in one interview. "I believe in creating ladders, not safety nets." In each picture, wearing different clothes in different settings, I recognized the man who had shared his coffee with me on my darkest day. I knew I had to find him, not just to thank him, but to understand, to ask him why, of all the desperate people in the world, he had chosen to help me. Finding James Harrington wasn't difficult. His foundation had an office downtown, and after gathering my courage for 3 days, I finally walked through its doors on a Tuesday afternoon. The receptionist asked if I had an appointment. I didn't. I simply said, "Please tell Mr. Harrington that the person he met on the park bench would like to speak with him." 20 minutes of nervous waiting later, I was led into a modest office. And there he was, standing by the window, looking exactly as he had that day. Same kind eyes, same thoughtful expression. The only difference was the setting. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "I wondered when you'd find me," he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. His voice was exactly as I remembered it. Gentle, grounding. "Why?" It was the only word I could manage at first. "Why me?" "Why not just tell me who you were?" He sat down slowly, considering his words. "If I had told you who I was that day, if I had offered you money or a job outright, would you have accepted?" He was right. I wouldn't have. Pride would have stopped me. "I've been wealthy for longer than I care to admit," he explained. "I've donated to charities, funded programs, written checks, but it all felt distant. Then my wife died 5 years ago." His eyes drifted to a photograph on his desk. "She always said I was missing the human element, so I started sitting on park benches. He told me he doesn't help everyone he meets. Sometimes he just listens. Sometimes that's all people need. But occasionally, he encounters someone at a crucial turning point, someone who needs not charity, but opportunity. I couldn't save my wife," he said quietly, "but I could honor how she lived by truly seeing people. The person I met that day wasn't looking for handouts. You were someone who had worked hard and hit extraordinary circumstances. You just needed the obstacles cleared." I found myself crying then, not from gratitude, but from being so completely seen. He handed me another handkerchief, just like the first time, and waited. "I'm not your savior," he insisted. "Everything you've accomplished, you've done yourself. I just removed some roadblocks." When I asked why he'd remained hidden for so long, his answer was simple. "The moment you felt you owed me something would be the moment your success became about me, not you. I didn't want that." As our conversation ended, I realized something profound had shifted. This wasn't a confrontation after all. It was a meeting between equals, the beginning of something new. That conversation with James changed everything, not because of what he'd done for me, but because of what he taught me about how to live. We didn't become best friends or family, nothing that dramatic. Instead, we developed something more nuanced, a genuine connection between two people who had witnessed each other's humanity in its rawest form. I finished my degree 6 months later. James attended my graduation, sitting quietly in the back, leaving before I could introduce him to anyone. It was his way, present but never center stage. When I was offered a position at a major marketing firm, I surprised everyone by turning it down. Instead, I joined a small agency that specialized in helping nonprofits and social enterprises tell their stories. The pay was less, but the work fed something in me that I hadn't realized was hungry. 2 years after our park bench meeting, I started a scholarship fund of my own. It was small at first, just enough to help one person per year with textbooks and supplies. James matched my contributions without my asking. The ripple effect, he called it when I thanked him. The only proper response to being helped is to help others. We still meet for coffee occasionally. He's never pompous or preachy, never makes me feel like I owe him anything. Sometimes he asks for my advice about his foundation's marketing. Sometimes we just talk about books or travel or the weather. But I've noticed he always keeps an eye on the people around us, especially those sitting alone. The most powerful lesson in all of this wasn't about money or opportunity. It was about seeing people, really seeing them when they feel invisible. It was about understanding that sometimes kindness requires secrecy, that genuine giving comes without the expectation of gratitude or recognition. I still have moments of disbelief when I think about how differently my life could have turned out. There are still days when I walk past that park bench and remember the person I was, crying into a coffee cup with an eviction notice in my pocket. But those memories no longer feel like mine alone. They're shared now, part of a larger story that includes not just my struggle, but the unexpected hand that reached into my darkness. We never know how one moment of kindness can change someone's entire life. Who could you be that person for today? Subscribe to hear more stories of life-changing encounters, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that good things can come from unexpected places.